the boy who spoke to stars, the whispering sky. Elias had always been different. While the other children spent their evenings chasing fireflies or helping their parents mend fishing nets, he wandered alone to the edge of the village, eyes lifted toward the heavens. To him, the sky was not a silent canopy of light. It was alive, breathing, murmuring, speaking in a language only he seemed able to hear. The stars whispered to him on nights when the air was still and the moon shone like a silver lantern. Their voices were subtle yet resonant, like distant bells carried on the wind. At first, Elias thought it was his imagination, but the whispers grew clearer, more insistent. They told him of the world's ancient past, of forgotten rivers that once cut through the mountains, of civilizations that had risen and fallen under their silent watch. Elias tried to share these secrets with his peers, but they laughed. "He is eccentric," they whispered among themselves. "A boy who listens to lights in the sky." Even his mother, though kind, worried about him. His father shook his head in disappointment, but Elias was undaunted. Each evening, he climbed the highest hill, where the wind carried the scent of pine and wildflowers, and he whispered back to the stars, "I am listening. Tell me more." On one particular night, when the constellations burned brighter than usual, he heard a warning. The land will suffer. A great drought is coming. Elias's heart raced. He rushed to the village square the next morning, repeating the stars' prophecy. But the villagers scoffed. "A child's fantasy," they said. "The sky speaks to no one." Yet deep inside, Elias knew the stars never lied. Chapter 2. The Village of Doubt. The drought arrived slowly, almost unnoticed. First, the rains grew less frequent. Then, the river shrank into a trickle, exposing stones that had not seen sunlight in generations. Crops wilted under the relentless sun. Wells ran dry. Fear began to spread through the village like a shadow. Elias watched silently as hunger carved hollows into the faces of his neighbors. He longed to remind them of his warning, but what good would it do? They had dismissed him once. They would dismiss him again. The whispers of the stars grew stronger at night. They told him of a hidden spring beyond the mountains, a place where water flowed pure and endless, untouched by drought. But reaching it would not be easy. The path was treacherous, full of sharp ridges and forests where shadows twisted into strange shapes. When Elias told the village elders, they laughed bitterly. "You expect us to trust you, boy? To send our men into the mountains chasing illusions? No, we will wait for the rains to return." But the rains did not return. Children cried from thirst. The animals grew weak, and still Elias listened. The stars whispered, "Go, Elias. Only you can find the spring. Only you can bring back life." One night, standing in the deserted square, Elias made his decision. He would go alone. At dawn, with nothing but a satchel of bread, a flask of water, and the faith of the stars, he set out toward the jagged horizon. Few villagers noticed his departure. Those who did shook their heads. "A fool's errand," they muttered. Yet Elias walked on, his eyes lifted skyward, seeking guidance from the silent constellations. Chapter 3. The Journey Beyond the Mountains. The mountains loomed like sleeping giants, their peaks veiled in mist. Elias's path was steep and merciless. Rocks shifted beneath his feet, and cold winds cut into his skin. More than once he stumbled, scraping his knees, but each time he rose again, clutching his satchel as it carried not bread, but courage itself. At night, the stars guided him. Their voices grew louder, filling his heart with strength. "Do not falter," they urged. "You are not alone." Sometimes their light illuminated hidden dangers, a loose stone, a thorny thicket, the gleam of a wolf's eyes in the dark. Elias felt both fear and awe. Days blurred into nights. Hunger gnawed at his stomach. Thirst burned his throat. His flask emptied quickly, and though he tried to ration his bread, it too dwindled. When despair threatened to overwhelm him, he lay on his back beneath the heavens, whispering, "Help me." And always the stars answered. At last, after many days, Elias reached a high ridge. Below, in a valley carved between cliffs, he saw it, a spring shimmering like liquid glass bubbling forth from the rocks. Wildflowers bloomed along its banks, and the air was cool and fragrant. Elias fell to his knees, tears mingling with laughter. He drank deeply, feeling life surge back into his veins. He filled his flask, then his satchel with wet cloths to carry the water. But he knew this was not enough. The village needed more than one boy could carry. Again, the stars spoke. "Guide them here, show them the way. Become the bridge." With new strength, Elias turned back toward the mountains, determined to bring his people hope. Chapter 4. The Song of Stars. The return journey was no less treacherous, but Elias's heart was as light. He moved quickly, guided by memory and starlight, until at last the familiar rooftops of the village appeared on the horizon. The people were weaker now, their faces gaunt, their voices hoarse. When Elias staggered into the square, flask raised high, they gathered around him in silence. He poured the spring's water into a wooden bowl, and the villagers drank. Their eyes widened. This was no ordinary water. It was pure, sweet, alive. Hope flickered once more. Elias told them of the spring beyond the mountains. At first, doubt clouded their faces, but when they looked into his eyes, bright with the reflection of the stars, they believed. For the first time, they saw not a foolish dreamer, but a guide. The next day, the villagers followed Elias into the mountains. The journey was long and perilous, but together they endured. At last, they reached the hidden valley where the spring flowed eternal. There, the people rejoiced, drinking, washing, singing with relief. Life returned to the village, carried by the waters of the stars' promise. From that night on, Elias was no longer mocked. He became known as the boy who spoke to stars, the one who listened when others doubted, the one who bridged the earth and the heavens. And though the villagers never heard the whispers themselves, they swore that when Elias looked skyward, the constellations seemed to burn brighter, as if singing a song of gratitude, a song only he could truly understand. The end.